For over 20 years, the Battlefield franchise has captivated the gaming world. Critical to its success is the more than 100 multiplayer levels which remain towering examples of nostalgia, quality, and unique design. With so many to experience, the maps of the Battlefield series keep that enduring legacy alive. This is their incredible story. In the burning oil fields of Iran, a massive battle is waged between American and Russian forces. In what became known as Operation Firestorm, both sides aim to control the vital resources through the use of ground armor, attack helicopters, and combat aircraft. The landscape is torched and the stakes are high. So high, in fact, that this epic battle is waged on more than one occasion. Operation Firestorm would first be introduced to gamers as a multiplayer level of Battlefield 3, the largest of those featured at launch. Players would find it to be one of the most vehicle-laden of the entire game, as it included nearly every vehicle available at the time. Its balance, scale, layout, and gameplay made it one of the most popular maps of the era. As a result, Operation Firestorm would return quickly, only around 2 years later or so, soon after the release of Battlefield 4 with the Second Assault DLC. For better or worse, this new version would be an exceptionally accurate remake of the original, though a handful of differences are present. Operation Firestorm is one of the most famous Battlefield maps, and having appeared so similarly in both titles, this will be one of the first times that I've attempted to not only analyze the level, but compare and contrast them in order to determine which is the superior version. Both iterations of Operation Firestorm take place in the Iranian oil fields. Everything from major geography, playable factions, deployments and map boundaries, the flag orientation, and major structures are almost identical. You really have to take a closer look at the finer details to locate the differences. When you examine the entire playable area versus where the fighting mostly takes place, that being the central facility comprising the objectives, it is possible to consider the map quite moderate in scale. However, these open boundaries and fields allow for far better tank flanking routes, exposed as they are. The map layout features 5 objectives closely positioned around a major refinery with supporting structures and equipment nearby. A highway runs in a straight line east to west in both versions, dividing the objectives with 3 above and 2 below. The density of the construction largely provides strong pathing and cover options in and around, but journeying away from the deployment leads into the open desert. Aside from a few isolated boulders, this mostly flat environment has minimal cover or terrain deviation. Only on the northeast of the map is there a series of large oil containers, indestructible in both games, which provides a substantial obstruction. Both versions have their faction deployments a good distance away from the objectives, with the US starting in the west and the Russians in the east, and in the same locations in each game. Each team's deployment is nestled behind hills of substantial size, the largest to be found on Firestorm. On the US side, this is practically a mountain, but both landmarks have a major impact on gameplay. These pillars of earth allow for sightlines across the entirety of the map. This is extremely detrimental, not necessarily for snipers, since they have minimal effect on the outcome of a round, unless of course there are simply too many not fighting for objectives. Rather, it is the compounding effect of Battlefield 3 and 4's gadgets and weapons like PLDs, SOFLAMs, javelins, and even homing tank shells, which are simply uncounterable at extreme ranges. The Russian hillside isn't too much of a problem, as its height is moderate and boundary respectable, but the US mountain is almost laughable, allowing for head glitches, peeking, target designators, and even the ability to bring tanks up to the top. It is simply a verticality option which should not exist. Moreover, the map boundary for the Russian team extends past the mountain, allowing Russian players to climb their own way up to the top, hide spawn beacons in the cliffs, fire down at the US deployment, hammer tanks entering the battle, and essentially hide like rats, causing chaos and depriving the US team of critical resources on flags. While this element does provide a unique excursion for players looking to engage enemies in a different manner, it simply detracts from the intention of the map. makes the objectives a secondary goal, provides insane cross-map sightlines, and allows for the abuse of the game's most unchecked weapons. Only a handful of other terrain features are of note. Along the base of the US mountain, a series of rocky hills and divots extend north from the D point toward the deployment. A small rocky slope descends from point A to B, providing solid cover, and a few singular boulders are strewn about in the desert. The lighting of each level is noticeably different. Battlefield 3's Firestorm was incredibly bright, lighting up the tan landscape and making the intensity almost overwhelming at times, especially when moving from inside of one building to another. While the sun blazes like a typical Battlefield 3 supernova with an immense glare, it isn't too bad here, though it is unevenly positioned on the Russian side. Oil fields were alight in the distance, providing an aesthetically cool contrast even though it had a minimal effect against the blue sky. Battlefield 4 made a huge correction in this regard. The sun glare was mostly eliminated as a result of dense clouds and smoke cover. In this second iteration, the map's name of Firestorm was no exaggeration. In the distance, and even within the playable area, oil wells are set ablaze, generating a tense and intimidating backdrop as the fires rage and smoke billows. Definitely one of the most memorable of Battlefield 4 and a significant step above its predecessor. A few structural changes were made to this version as well. Situated at the D point, the large construction crane present in Battlefield 3 is now destructible. Climbable via a ladder, this provides a tall vantage point for players. However, interacting with a detonator nearby or shooting the crane's counterweight triggers a massive explosion which brings it down in grand spectacle. Owing to Battlefield 4's inclusion of IEDs, these massive sunken explosives made an appearance on the map as well, with one located in the very center of the E objective. When detonated either by tank combat or other player interaction, this provides a chaotic, sudden shock to all on the map. But there is yet far more destruction to be had. While fires burned around the Battlefield 3 version, Battlefield 4 improved upon the small oil wells. Denoted by a red cap, these could be shot at and ignited by players, and they would burn permanently for the entire round. Additional breaks in the pipelines are marked by the same yellow and red vents, which spew fire for long durations when impacted. Small pools of spilled oil lie around the map, often near tankers or wells, and can also be set alight. Not only would all of these interactables cause environmental damage to players within, but if an enemy died in the fire, the player who ignited the well would get the kill, no matter where they were at the time. Finally, the large refinery forming the C objective possessed a tower which dwarfed all others. While present in Battlefield 3, BF4 included a nearby button which activated the vent, burning players who might be atop and abusing the height advantage. Both versions of Operation Firestorm have 5 objectives in the same orientation. The flags are spaced rather closely, leading to intense and constant conflict. However, getting to them takes a moment, as each team's deployment lies on the outskirts behind the large hills. The hills protect and obscure these deployments, protecting them from spawn camping. Each base is heavily detailed and fortified, one of the few in the game to do so, which adds to its immersion. The vehicle count on both games is exactly the same, with all of the map assets originating in these deployments. Each contains 4 tanks per team, along with 1 mobile AA, as well as dual helipads for the team's transport and attack helicopters. They also provide a set of runways for the duo of jet aircraft. One of the major differences between the versions is the type of aircraft available to the teams. In Battlefield 3, both are fighter jets, F-18s for the US and Su-35s for the Russians. In Battlefield 4, this is changed to be one fighter, an F-35 or Su-50, and an attack jet, an A-10 Warthog or Su-25 Frogfoot. The change in jet orientation was not consequential because of their type, but rather the more balanced vehicle design of Battlefield 4. In that game, while the attack jet could quickly destroy ground armor with the main gun, rocket pods, or JDAM bombs, the opposing fighter acted as a direct counter, hunting them out of the skies. The fighter itself could really only harass tanks with the laser-guided missile, unless they made a lucky hit on one that was already damaged. Battlefield 3 fighter jets were comparatively abusive. The strength and reload rate of the missile pods was notoriously overpowered. When the jets of one team outmatched the other, the resulting domination could single-handedly decide a round. The final difference in the main deployments was Battlefield 4's feature of including an automated anti-aircraft battery, adding some protection from air vehicle encroachment. This proved beneficial to overall game balance. As the battle begins, all ground vehicles and infantry leave the deployments along a single route, looping around the hills and intersecting with the main highway. On both versions of the map, this singular pathing contributes heavily to base camping and one-sided games in the event of a full capture, as the terrain is flat, cover minimal, and sightlines long. Breakouts are nearly impossible and one of Firestorm's major flaws. Approaching the battle from the US side, the first objective is the construction site. In both versions, here players can find a large warehouse, adjacent office building, and nearby structure in progress. Construction materials and shipping containers surround the area, providing substantial cover and protected spawn points. A semi-truck sits in front of the warehouse, creating an obstruction and forming the capture radius of the flag. Small differences exist in the Battlefield 4 version, such as a more completed office building and a slightly altered crane. The large asset at this point can drop a concrete cylinder if the cable is destroyed, but as the tower remains standing, it is commonly used throughout a round by those who would scale the ladder. Atop, hitboxes are pretty bad, and countering enemies using gadgets is extremely difficult. It is also the only method aside from aircraft by which players can get on top of the large building, as for some reason, in both games, no ladder exists to access the roof, creating a verticality issue. Heading east of the construction site and slightly down a rock-covered hill, the next objective is the B point, the warehouse. Along with some other materials and more containers, it is actually 3 warehouses which make up the area. The flag sits just outside the largest of the group. Its capture radius extends within much of the building and into the street between the 2 structures. Rooftops of each warehouse can be accessed via ladders and pipelines, allowing infantry a major advantage against attacking ground armor without being impossible to clear. Many of the warehouse walls can be destroyed, making infantry inside vulnerable, so the rooftops play well here to balance things out. Further east, the large refinery dominates the landscape. This is the filling station. A web of pipelines and connecting catwalks and ladders provide a network of pathing options for players, though cover is touch and go, and hidden players potentially lurk around every corner or ledge. The tallest ventilation pipe, as mentioned earlier, provides a major verticality option for players looking for a cross-map sightline. The difference between games is that a ladder is present in Battlefield 4, allowing players to scale the tower to different vantage points. On the Battlefield 3 version, air vehicles are required to land at the very top. The objective's capture radius sits on the road between the refinery and the office across the street, although it is partially capturable from the refinery catwalks, offering some protection from tanks. 2 semi-trucks sit on the main road, while around the refinery, pipes and other large storage tanks make the surrounding area dense with objects and cover for players. A bit southeast of the A objective and across the highway, the D objective is the offices, though there is only one completed building. The others are under construction, with a large crane and materials scattered around the area. The open multi-floor building has some fencing around it, as well as a stationary tow emplacement on the 3rd floor aimed east across the desert. The flag sits in the lot between the structures. Substantive cover is lacking in the area, especially once walls and buildings are leveled. The open floors of the construction site make them equally ineffective, barring a few moments of ground floor hiding spaces. Spawn points in the vicinity are also poor. Somewhat isolated, the offices are a minor objective compared to the others. It's not really a gimme flag despite being on the US side, and being at the base of the mountain makes it difficult for the Russian team to attack and occupy for long. The final objective is the Army Outpost, E. Also located south of the highway, it sits on the other end of the vast desert from the D point. This desert lacks in cover or geography, and its distance means that infantry rarely survive the crossing without vehicular support. A small distinction could be made of the Battlefield 4 version, which features slightly more cover in the form of craters and vehicle wreckage. Given the sightlines from the warehouses and refinery from the north, and high ground from the office flag and watchtowers from the army base, this expanse is frequently a dead zone, especially for infantry. Even tanks fall victim to long-range tows and flying tank shells. The base itself is one of the largest objectives of the base Battlefield 3 game. Its ring of fortifications, barracks, towers, stationary emplacements, and office space makes for a strong battle zone. Player respawns are largely protected as well. Only when major fighting leaves many of the walls and buildings destroyed can cover prove problematic. In the Battlefield 4 version, large craters are found along its exteriors, making it difficult for armor to approach at speed. These also make a great spot for hiding landmines and infantry counterattacks. Armor itself has a hard time at the army base since enemies can lurk and respawn all around, and the capture radius is massive. While this does give infantry a huge advantage, the flag's position across the road makes it difficult for players to approach or leave without being cut down. This objective actually helps define the infantry armor dichotomy of Firestorm. The map is not a bad infantry experience, especially compared to larger vehicle levels of both games. The tight layout helps in this regard. One could even argue that there is a balance between the two, but the amount of vehicles on the map frequently gets the better of the matchup. The numerous destructible walls of the warehouses, offices, and materials allow tanks to weasel their way into buildings like predators, hunting players scurrying to the upper levels. The elimination of the warehouse walls also removes much of the protection players have around objectives to the point where any angle is dangerous. Even if infantry have exceptional cover options in both versions while these remain in place, it is the difference in the vehicle design itself which defines the frustrations. In Battlefield 3, it is the aircraft which dominate. As explained earlier, the power of the fighters and their rocket pods are relentless, but the attack helicopter is just as much of a threat. The map has a very high flight ceiling, allowing it to stay out of range of most counters and hover near the mountains, using the TV missiles to ding tanks and secondary gunner cannon to delete scurrying infantry. The more restrained nature of Battlefield 4 air vehicles makes them less effective overall against everything, and the mobile AA being altogether stronger helps as well. However, it is the ground armor of Battlefield 4 which is the imminent threat to infantry. Faster, more maneuverable, armed with APS, and chiefly some of the strongest thermal optics of the series, they can spot and intercept enemies half the map away. The addition of the auto-locking staff shells did not help matters either, especially if a tank armed with them decided to sit atop a mountain. Nevertheless, the layout of the map in combination with all of these assets usually provides incredible moments for players. The tank battles, infantry counterplays, and possibilities to down incoming aircraft are all in constant supply. Firestorm was also a fan favorite for its rush mode, particularly in Battlefield 3, though its layout was identical in BF4. The attacking US team starts from the east, from the side where the Russian base would be in Conquest. Over the course of 3 sectors, they need to arm and destroy a duo of MCOMs starting in the Refinery and working their way westward toward what would be the A point. Each team begins with multiple tanks, making it one of the largest armor clashes of the game mode. Additionally, each team possessed 1 attack jet for the duration of the game. This attack jet was unique to the rush mode in Battlefield 3, while it was already present in Conquest in Battlefield 4. Its strength in both games, with limited enemies, allowed them to dominate an enemy team if the pilot was highly skilled. Generally speaking, Operation Firestorm in both versions is an exceptional multiplayer level. Fast, intense, vehicle-laden with effective infantry zones and a wide variety of applicable playstyles, it exemplifies the best of what Battlefield's sandbox can offer. But it isn't perfect. Map boundaries are both wild and inconsistent. Extreme sightlines are often abusive from both the mountains and from the hangar rooftops, some of which are lacking appropriate pathing options to counter. These remain doubly effective when you factor in the distances of the team's deployments and the singular route most players must take to re-enter the battle. In the event of a full capture, an eventuality common in both games, the mechanics of anti-tank weapons combined with high ground make it excruciatingly difficult to break out. Not even the transport helicopters, something which should facilitate greater player movement, can help. With some alterations to the level design, all of this can be avoided and the experience greatly improved. First, the height of the US mountain should be significantly lowered to reduce its towering sightlines and incentive to camp. Second, to substantially improve breakout options and increase map flow, smaller, secondary main base deployments should be added for each team on the opposite sides of their respective hills. However, these will only activate in the event of a full flag capture by one team and only provide several fast-moving light transports. This would create a far wider border to escape and spread out enemy players. Third, the D objective will be expanded with additional small office buildings and support structures. This will extend south and east, providing substantially more cover for infantry and greater spawn point protection. It will also slightly close the gap between the D and E objectives. With an added oil field burning near each new deployment, smoke would obfuscate players advancing back onto the map towards the objectives. All combined, these changes would improve map flow and help fix Firestorm's most significant problems. So which version is better in the end? Well, while Battlefield 3 clearly got the ball rolling, it is Battlefield 4 which refines the formula. Improved vehicle balance, greater destruction, more interactive environment, better lighting, and overall improved aesthetics, these factors weigh heavily in the game's favor. Only one issue is present in Battlefield 4 that is not in Battlefield 3. This is the inclusion of the commander assets. The distribution of these assets is simply strange. The B point provides the controlling team a cruise missile. No problems here, as it is in the middle of the map. However, the C point provides no resource, and the E point provides the vehicle scan, an underwhelming asset. On the opposite side of the map, the A point provides the comparatively stronger infantry scan, and the D point, the most consequential asset of them all, the AC-130 gunship. While nowhere near as tanky as its Battlefield 3 counterpart, it can still be an annoying feature, especially when one team doesn't have a commander, or is active during an enemy full capture, or has a clueless player in the team's mobile AA vehicle, all providing an extra obstacle to overcome. The principal issue with the resource, however, is its dependence on holding the D objective to obtain. With the A and D points being located on the US side of the map, they are essentially in that team's hands most of the round, creating a minor imbalance. Even so, all of the additional bells and whistles arguably make Battlefield 4's Firestorm a preferable, more stable, and immersive experience. Between the sheer amount of destructible and combustible materials, it seriously embodies the name and shows off everything a Battlefield game is meant to do, and it knocks at the door of the best maps of the series. But it does, unfortunately, have some issues which cannot be ignored. Issues common and significant enough that if you've played either game, you've doubtlessly experienced and probably complained about. Operation Firestorm, regardless of the version you play, is nonetheless an extremely popular Battlefield level, acclaimed for its tank battles, jet freedom, infantry opportunities, incredible background art, and sandbox moments. It is one of the defining vehicle maps of its era, and one which serves as an inspiration for many future designs.